Tommy Rants here. A couple of years ago, I sat around one night thinking up stories that were relevant to me from my childhood. I have a pretty good memory for my childhood days, or I like to think so. And I made a list one night because at the time I was toying with the idea of writing short stories, which I pursued to a certain extent and still may pursue further. But I wrote down over 50 of them one night, and as I jotted down these, just something that would remind me of the story later, I also gave them each a title. I called this one Karma Rocks. This happened in the summer of 1961. We lived in Dallas, Texas, near White Rock Lake, and had taken a summer vacation to California where we had some relatives. And I guess we must have been gone for a couple of weeks, because when I got back, I noticed I couldn't connect with the friends that I was used to running with before our vacation. It was like I'd been gone for a year. And it wasn't that they'd moved or anything. It was just that, it escaped me that they would find something to do besides play with me during the day while I was gone. And, so they'd connected with other kids on the block and stuff. And they were still around, and we eventually reconnected. But at that time, while we were gone, a kid had moved in next door. Actually, there was an empty lot between our houses. His name was Peter Pomeroy, and he and I became friends quickly. I was 5 years old, and so was Peter. And for a few days, we played together. I suppose we went down to the creek, rode our bikes over there, explored. I just remember we got along real good, and we ran around together for a few days. But I also have a memory that it was going to be short-lived, because they were going to be moving or going somewhere, and so there was always an underlying theme that this was going to be fun, but it wasn't going to last very long, and that was certainly the case. After several days of playing, I went outside one morning. I was too young for school; was still a year away for me. So I was always looking. We were outside all the time back then, especially in the summer, and pretty much ran around and did what we wanted. I had good parents and everything, but they didn't monitor my every move. I could disappear for hours at a time, and as long as I came back for meals, that was good enough. So I went to find Peter that day, and as soon as I walked out of the house, I saw him. He was in his side yard, and he had a couple of younger siblings with him. I think it was a little boy and a little girl, probably 1 and 3 or 2 and 3 or 4 years old. And they were all kind of playing together, but not moving around a whole lot. And I yelled at him, "Hey, Peter, want to play?" And he hesitated and turned around and looked at me, and he said, "No, I'm with my brother and sister right now." And that surprised me, because we'd been playing together every day. So I thought, what's up here? Well, I couldn't accept that. So I hung out in my front yard, inched a little bit closer, and they were busy. Whatever toys they were playing with, whatever they were doing, they weren't paying any attention to me, and particularly Peter wasn't. So I think I tried running around, throwing a ball, trying to get his attention, and never could. And it really bothered me, because he didn't say, my mom said I have to play with my little brother and sister. He said I'm playing with them. So as if it was by choice, and he didn't prefer to have my company around. But I risked one more question and said, "Hey, you want me to come over?" And he turned around, just barely acknowledged me, and said no. I got mad. I got really mad at it because I couldn't understand it. I went around the side of our house and started throwing rocks, kind of giving up on him. There was a big field behind our house, and I'd go out there and throw rocks when I didn't have anything else to do. And the more I thought about it, the madder I got. So I came back to the front side yard, and stupidly, God, I regret it to this day, I had a rock in my hand, a white rock, probably, like an inch. It was an irregular shape, but yeah, I'll call it about 1 cubic inch, maybe. And I threw that thing up in the air, sort of in the vicinity of where Peter and his siblings were playing. But I was really just trying to get his attention. Unfortunately, the next thing I knew, I hear Peter scream, and I look over there, and there is blood dripping down this kid's head. Like me, he had a buzz cut at the time. He was a little blonde kid too, white hair, just like I had. And he and his siblings went inside. And so did I. I went in my house. They never looked at me or anything, and I don't, I remember when I threw it, nobody was looking. So I had the feeling that even if they knew who did it, they might not have seen me do it. So I went in the house, and I didn't tell anybody. This is the first story of my childhood I remember that had consequences that had nothing to do with persons in a position of authority, like my parents or a teacher or a neighbor's parent or anything like that. I never saw Peter again, not in any meaningful way. If I saw him from a distance, that was it. And they moved shortly after that. I never reconnected with him. So about a year later, we moved to Richardson, which is a suburb north of Dallas. Still in the Metroplex, but north of Dallas. It was newer at the time. And we moved up there. We lived on a small circle with about 10 houses on it. And I guess Dad was doing better because we had a new two-story house for the first time. And there were a ton of places around there to play. There was a creek out back that wandered around the whole neighborhood, and you could go to different parts of that creek, and the water would be different depths, and you could see different sights. And I went pretty far away on this particular day, which would have been the summer of 1962, probably in July or maybe August. It was hot. I remember that. And I developed new friends in that neighborhood. There happened to be some other guys my age, and we did stuff together a lot. But there was one or two periods where there were lulls where, nobody had moved in, because it was a newish neighborhood. And so this particular day I was playing alone again, only I was enjoying myself, content with sitting in the creek, and this part of the creek was clear, flowing, and I was sitting there in the water. It was only 6 inches deep, probably, just exploring, probably trying to catch tadpoles or something. And I noticed these 3 boys up on a redwood deck on one side of the creek, but set back from the creek. I don't know how far. Distances are hard to quantify when you get older. something you think was a long way when you're a kid. If you go back and look at it later, it's often a short distance. And so, I don't know, 50 feet away, maybe 40, I don't know. It seemed like more at the time. And I didn't know these kids, but I knew who they were. And one of them was about my age, but I think he was a year older. The other two were older brothers, and they were like approaching teenage years. And the three of them ran together. I don't want to say it was a bad kid, but that had kind of been my thinking, was that to stay away from them. Well, they were out on their redwood deck, which overhung the hill that led down to the creek. And as I said, I was playing in the water, just minding my own business, and probably wearing cutoffs. I was probably barefoot. And they're up there, and I can see them throwing rocks, but they're not throwing them at me. They're just like killing time, just a toss here and there, and like they don't have anything to do. I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden, I felt this sharp pain, just like almost like and heard it like a crack on top of my skull. It was right back here. I can still feel the spot today. And the blood came, and there was a lot of blood. I reached up with my hand like that and pulled it down. It was solid red, so much so that my hand was dripping blood, and it started dripping up my arms as I changed positions. Pretty soon I had it all over me, and it just kept coming. And of course I ran home. I was still of the age then. It was run to mom and tell mom what happened, and that's what I did. And I remember in that new house we had, if you entered it in front of the back in the garage, there was a bathroom, half bathroom. It just had a sink and a toilet in it, and there was a mirror in there. And I ran in there and I said, "Mom, come here." And I looked at it, and the blood was just dripping down my face, but it had slowed down quite a bit by then. And my mom said she didn't freak out. I thought she was gonna freak because it was so frightening looking to me. She got a towel and wet it and cleaned me up, and then she put a dry washcloth or something over the wound on my head and said we better take you to the doctor. She didn't seem real concerned though. And she'd never asked me how it happened, at least not up to that point. Well, excuse me. Throat was getting dry. Our doctor at that time was up in Plano, and so it was about 15-20 minute ride in those days. So we're riding to the doctor, and all of a sudden she asked me the question that I didn't want to answer, and I don't know why, it just felt uneasy about it. And she said, "How did you cut your head?" And I said, "I don't know, Mom. There were some kids throwing rocks, and I think I probably named their last name because I knew what it was at the time." And she said, "Now, why on earth would so-and-so throw a rock at you?" And I said, "I don't know, Mom." And then I just clammed up, but I started thinking. And then I remembered the year before with Peter Pomeroy. And that was meaningful to me. My head didn't really hurt that much. As it turned out, the doctor only put one stitch in it, and that was probably more for, just for me to be able to say I got stitches than it was to really fix me up, because it was a small hole. He just happened to hit a blood vessel or something and bled a lot, which is what I deserved. So did Peter's head bleed a lot. So that story went from being something I guarded as a secret because I didn't want my parents to know about it, and it remained that way. But it just sunk in on the way to the doctor's and afterwards on the way home that there was meaning that to what had happened, and I couldn't quite figure it out, but that's what happened. That's what happened. Of course, looking back at it now, I see all kinds of lessons in that story. But I didn't learn that lesson that day, not completely, because it wasn't a year or two later I had another incident where I did something I regretted. Maybe I'll tell that story next time, but that's the end of that one for today. I hope you enjoyed Karma Rocks. This is Tommy Rants. See you next time.